Why is Russia threatening the UK? Ukraine has just launched one of its largest attacks since the war began, allegedly aiming British-made drones at Moscow. The Kremlin told the UK there will be consequences. But Britain says it's committed to giving Ukraine the equipment it needs to defend itself against Russia.
We are not fair weather friends. We will be there in Ukraine's hour of need.
So, how has the UK become so involved with this war? And after 4 years of fighting and hundreds of thousands of deaths, is it all any closer to ending? Here's the breakdown. This weekend's assault on Moscow is one of Ukraine's largest attacks on Russia since the war started. In the last 3 days, Ukraine fired over 1,400 drones towards Russia, with many aiming for the capital. 7 deaths were reported across Russia. In that time, 17 Ukrainians were reportedly killed by Russian strikes. President Zelensky has promised a response. Ukraine has stepped up its attacks on Russia this year with long-range missiles and swarms of drones striking military targets and energy facilities. But in the last month, they've also started hitting the warehouses of Russia's biggest online retailer, Wildberries, which is like their version of Amazon. Billions of pounds worth of merchandise has been destroyed after Ukraine knocked out 7 of its 10 logistics hubs. And Ukraine will be hoping that by hitting the pockets of Russian consumers, it can turn the tide of public opinion against Vladimir Putin's war. In Russia, the Kremlin is continuing to suppress anyone who speaks out against the war, going as far as banning the only anti-war party from standing in next month's election. But here's where the UK fits in. For the first time, Russia has claimed that British-made drones were used in attacks on its soil. The UK has been a vocal supporter of Ukraine since the outbreak of the war in 2022, consistently defining Putin's invasion as an illegal act of aggression in violation of international law.
This is the UK doing what it has long said it would do, which is to support Ukraine 100% against this illegal war led by Vladimir Putin. We are providing support so that Ukraine can defend itself, and that's been the British position all the way through this conflict by previous Prime Ministers. It remains the case with me.
But Moscow is not happy. Its London embassy has accused the UK of deliberately opting for an escalation of the Ukraine crisis and has warned that these actions will inevitably carry consequences. In response, the UK's Ministry of Defence says Britain stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine and is committed to providing the equipment Ukraine needs to defend itself against Putin's illegal invasion, telling Russia that it will continue to stand against its aggression. The latest escalation comes 4 years into a war that has cost billions of pounds and hundreds of thousands of lives. And while President Zelensky continues to present peace proposals to Russia, the bombs keep falling on both sides. So where is the conflict heading? Will Russia act on its threats to the UK? And can Ukraine's latest strategy turn Russians against the war? To help answer those questions, I'm going to speak to Natia Seskuria. She's an international security expert and consultant on geopolitics. Natia, this is the first time UK drones have supposedly been used to bomb Russia. How significant is that?
Well, it's the first time since Ukraine has used UK drone capabilities when it comes to attacking Russian critical infrastructure. And as we know, it has been a while, precisely more than 40 days since Ukraine has started the long-range drone attacks against Russian, deep strikes against Russia. So I think that's why it's significant, because Russia sees these attempts from the Ukrainian side as a threat. And that's why I think Russia is trying to threaten the UK in order to make sure that UK does not support Ukraine when it comes to boosting its capabilities for future strikes.
And how seriously do you think the UK should take those threats? They've promised consequences to that action.
I think UK has already been taking these threats quite seriously, and this is not the first time that Russia is threatening the UK. I think when it comes to the threats, it is highly unlikely that we will expect some sort of military escalation from the Russian side, but these threats should be taken seriously when it comes to the Russian efforts to destabilize the UK. And we know that Russia has had long track record when it comes to increased cyber and espionage attempts against the UK, as well as aggressive information operations in the UK, and also some of the notorious cases when it comes to assassinations on the UK soil, as well as disruptions when it comes to UK national critical infrastructure.
Yeah, what do you think those attacks might look like? You mentioned some of those in the past. Do you think that's something that the average person should be worried about, or is it more for the secret services?
I think the average person should certainly be aware that Russia views the UK as one of its key adversaries, and that's why they should be aware that they might be targeted when it comes to Russian disinformation campaigns, for example, which is looking at changing UK public opinion when it comes to support to Ukraine. But of course, this is more of a case for the intelligence agencies and the UK agencies when it comes to countering these efforts from the malign efforts from the Russian side. I think UK is already well aware that Russia has been trying to disrupt the UK democracy, and this has been ongoing for a while, and it predates even the war against Ukraine. But right now, I think what Russians are trying to do is also to make the public audience within Russia aware that Russia is potentially able and capable of retaliating some of the efforts of Ukraine's allies to boost Ukraine's capabilities when it comes to attacking Russia.
Do you think the use of these drones was a surprise to Russia? I mean, UK have made no secret of the fact that they support Ukraine from the offset of this war.
Yes, well, UK has committed substantial military support to Ukraine, including a plan which has been well stated in advance to deliver 150,000 drones and some of the air defense missiles to Ukraine in 2026. So I think this is not a secret that Russians are very much aware of, that UK is committed in a long-term perspective to support Ukraine. However, of course, there is a phase of escalation in the war against Ukraine, and Russia, on the other hand, is trying to escalate tensions when it comes to attacking Ukraine with ballistic missiles. And on the other hand, Ukraine has been quite successful at targeting some of the key areas of Russian economy. So that's why I think Russia is making a case here that Ukraine is only able to do so with the help of its allies. And in this case, UK has been one of the most long-standing allies of Ukraine. So I think that's why Russia is specifically pointing at the UK.
Does the bombing of Wildberries escalate this further? How do you see this playing out?
Targeting Wildberries is very significant because the company itself is a major logistics platform for Russians, as well as a key player when it comes to Russian economy. But I think it's more than that, because Wildberries network, the warehouses, are keeping some of Russia's military and dual-use goods, and that's why Ukraine has justified targeting this particular retailer. But I think there is more to that, because Ukrainians, what Ukrainians have been trying is to bring the war closer to the Russian households. And that's why it's so significant, because for the first time ever, Russians are now feeling increasingly worried about the future of this war. And what Ukraine is trying to achieve in a longer term perspective is to change the rationale when it comes to President Putin's decisions on how he would or will he escalate or not this war. I think we are not close to the end of this war, even though Ukraine has had some successes when it comes to its 40-day campaign against Russia. And I do think that Putin's room for maneuvering is shrinking. So when it comes to what sort of decisions he can make in the next couple of months or so, there is, of course, the option to go back to the negotiation table and be more reasonable when it comes to what Russia can accept in terms of the concessions. But I don't think that we are there yet. And Putin believes that he still has a space to escalate the tensions. And I do think that he will probably choose to escalate things before he makes a decision to go back to the negotiation table. When it comes to escalation scenarios, I think the most likely scenario is potentially to mobilize Russian forces. And in that case, I think it is probably more likely that Russia will be looking at some sort of partial mobilization, which would mobilize around 200 or 300,000 people. That may give the space to Russians to escalate things when it comes to the battlefield. I think it's a very risky decision when it comes to the domestic political situation, because we already know that there are increasingly more Russians who are supporting the negotiated settlement of this war.
And lastly, how is all of this playing out in Russia? We know that the Kremlin are shutting down anti-war voices. Is there support for the war there still?
There is still a considerable number of Russians who are believing the Kremlin propaganda, and the way Russia is framing this war is that it is an existential war from the Russian side, which Russia is fighting not just against Ukraine, but the whole of West. And I think the idea to threaten the UK and to point at the UK is also part of this narrative that Russia is fighting this war against NATO, against United States and the European allies. And that's why Putin is justifying that it's so crucial for him to make sure that Russia meets some of its military and political goals when it comes to before Putin ends the war. But at the same time, as we know, especially throughout the past couple of months, there has been more voices that are casting their dissatisfaction when it comes to how this is all unfolding for Russia. Especially, I think people are worried about the ongoing strikes in different parts of Russia. And this is creating both economic problems, but also massive disruptions when it comes to the daily lives in Russia. But at the same time, I think the problem is that there are, of course, no credible opposition forces, and there is no willingness within Russia to go out and protest against the war. So I think when it comes to domestic situation, Putin is still very much in control of the public opinion. But more Ukraine is able to attack Russia and achieve some of its aims when it comes to striking deep inside Russia, I think we will see more dissatisfaction within Russia.
Natia Seskuria, thank you very much for joining us. That's the breakdown. Thanks for watching. See you next time.